It's October 12th, and I am still talking about the people that I was forced to stay with because the federal government forced me out of housing. So after I remember that while I was staying with the man who lived next door, as I've said, he had a laptop that had a webcam. It was an attached webcam, and I had a feeling that it was turned on sometime, but I didn't know for sure. But nobody saw me at his house otherwise. And I did find out that the Wi-Fi that I was using through him, through his computer, that he was connecting, that there was a network that all of my online activities were being connected to. And I didn't know who that network, I didn't know who was involved with that network, but I saw it, and then I felt really uncomfortable, and I asked him about that, and he acted nervous. So I know that, you know, when I was at his house, that's when I was first looking up this Royal website and looked a few things up, and then my son was poisoned with permanent hair solution, and I talked about that in one of my previous posts from yesterday. And I also know that one thing that I remember is I did look up something about the royal family, and I remember that there were a bunch of photos of them going to church or something. And it was right after I felt like and possibly they would just happen to be wearing the same color, but I had a blanket, I slept on the floor, and it was in front of this webcam, basically, his computer and his webcam. And typically I had it on one, it was like on one side it was red, on the other side it was blue, something like that. And on the day, like a bright, kind of a cobalt blue color. And for whatever reason, when I went to sleep, and I remembered that I had switched the blanket over because, I don't remember why, but I remember that he noticed, and I don't know if he said something to somebody about it, but I also had the feeling that somebody was monitoring me through this webcam. And I remember that I looked up something about, it was right about that time that I was looking at some of the royal stuff, and I remember I looked up where they were going, something about church the next day, or news about them, and what they had was a bunch of photos of all of Fergie's kids, like Fergie, the redhead Fergie. All of her kids were wearing this same color blue as that I had slept under the night before with a blanket. And a couple other people were wearing that color too, but like, there were so many different people wearing the exact same color. I am sure that it's a total coincidence, but I happened to, at that time, be looking up some royal things. And I had just found out that his internet service was connected to another network, so all of my things that I was writing was being read by others. So I just remember that stood out to me a little bit. But I can't make any kind of a real guess about it. I just remember that I noticed it. And I had something at an Albertsons when I went out with him. He knew where we were going, and he got something at Albertsons from the deli, and I remember I ate it, and I had a really horrible reaction. And the next morning, I had a horrible stomach ache, and I was extremely tired, and I had a lot of cramping right after I ate this. I thought it was some kind of food poisoning, and I went to sleep, and then I woke up the next morning, and I felt like nobody had been with me intimately in one area, but something else had happened. Like something was different about my body, and I thought that never happens, and I thought that was very bizarre, and I kind of wondered if I'd been drugged. And after that point, I remember that he was saying, why don't you, he was then trying to get me to sleep in his bed with him. He's like, I won't touch you, you can stay on the other side. But I mean, I always slept on the floor in the living room, in a totally different room. But I kind of wondered why he would have the idea to invite me to his bed after I noticed that it seemed like maybe I'd been drugged and had something happen to me, possibly. But not not like a typical thing. It was like something else that was just really different and not normal for my body. And also then after that, I remember my computer, I started having some of the remote torture stuff happen to me, where it was affecting my body, and then my computer was charged up, like vibrating more than usual, and kind of had a weird staticky feeling above the keyboard. Not just like normal, as we all kind of know how computers can have quirks, and laptops too. But it was definitely something palpable that you could feel, and I said, feel this. And then I realized that when he was looking at me, I realized he knew. I don't know how he knew, but he knew that that was happening. And then he did, and he said, yes, he did feel it. Of course he did, because, you know, you couldn't miss it. But that was right about the end of the time that I was staying with him. It was right about then. And then at the same time that I was with him there, I had been talking to another man who's connected to Canada. And he was in the neighborhood. His name was Graham. He knew judges in the area, and he also had driven a long-haul truck back and forth between Canada and the United States. And it's possible that he was involved in doing something harmful to my son or to me. I used to talk with him about food and other things. But, I mean, like when I visited him, it was just to chat, and we used to watch the food channel and, you know, might have a drink. Nothing ever happened, of course. But then we would talk about food. I thought it was fun to talk to. It was most fun to look at the food channel after having a drink and then think about different things you could make. And that's just something he happened to be watching. I really am not, like, I'm not really that into food shows. It was just something to do. And I later wondered about him because he didn't seem to just be a long-haul truck driver. I wondered if he had other things that were going on, but I don't think he ever defended me. I think he had a judge that was a friend of his, and I kept wondering if, you know, anybody was how many people were going to come forward and say, yeah, I've talked to her, I know who she is, I've seen her speaking and looking me in the eye on a daily basis. She's not paranoid schizophrenic, so how come you're calling this woman paranoid schizophrenic? I mean, really, aside from my description of torture by technology, there is nothing that sounds paranoid, quote-unquote, schizophrenic about me at all. You can tell by looking at me and by my mannerisms and demeanor and speech that I'm not paranoid schizophrenic. The only thing that sounds weird is my talk about torture. And it sounds weird because either somebody talking about that kind of thing, about government stuff and torture, is possibly mentally ill, or it's really happening and the government doesn't want to admit it because there are too many criminals involved and they're liable. And I've been able to prove a lot of things that I've been accused of, you know, being delusional over. I've been able to prove that those things are true. I'm not a hypochondriac. I've been able to prove I'm not exaggerating my physical problems, and I'm not delusional, and I'm not mentally ill. I am telling the truth. The torture against my son as well, that was very real, and that is still happening. I don't feel that my son is safe in this country until this country shows me that they have rectified their problem. By rectifying a huge, grievous wrong, you make an apology to the Avilaws for illegally taking a child and placing him with them when the United States government had no right to kidnap him from me to begin with. It was an illegal, unlawful adoption. It's not valid. And then torturing me so that I can't even contest that in appeals. At what point could I have contested that in appeals when the United States government has used the same torture against me the entire process? They've made it impossible for me to have any access to my own son. And what exactly does the United States expect from me then? Because all that they're going to get from me is my telling the entire world what the United States has done, which isn't good for the United States, because people do believe me. And if the United States wants to start looking like a moral country, what they have to do is correct what they've done wrong. And at this point, it has to be through an investigation from some group somewhere, and someone just saying, you broke the law, this is invalid, and it's being overturned. Period. And I can't do that through the courts. And I haven't been able to do that because all of the public defenders that were hired were corrupt and kept any kind of records out of the court file. And personally, I have been tortured any time that I've ever tried, even on my own. So it has never been an option for me to quote-unquote access the courts or the judicial system. That has never been an option. And where that is not an option, it means there is an enormous amount of public corruption. And if that public corruption has interfered with my rights and my son's rights and has resulted in a hostage situation and in kidnapping, then the United States government is responsible for doing something about it. I mean, this is not... We are not in the 1950s anymore, where you can just keep this kind of thing under lock and key. The information is already out. And it's not going to get any better for the United States if they don't do something about this. After I was... Basically, around the time that I noticed something was different about my body, after I'd had this really weird reaction to something that was purchased at Albertsons, and after seeing pretty much, it was after I saw all these knives out on the counter, after I saw my son's face cut up, I left. I left the same day that I saw the knives. I got my things. I remember that the apartment manager around that time was harassing me too, and her son was connected to the United States military. So I think the United States military was, her son was Irish American, Irish Catholic American, and United States military. I think he was at West Point. And basically, I was kind of being harassed there anyway, and then I start seeing knives from this man that I was staying with, who's, by the way, was going to the Assembly of God Church. He was, you know, passing himself off as this, like, nice Protestant man. And the other thing that was really weird is I one time went to that same bar that was run by Michael Holt with him, and I shouldn't have ever gone back to that bar because I didn't think about the fact that her brother would be videotaping any time that I was there. And he wanted to buy me drink after drink. And there was another woman there that he was meeting. He told me he wanted to introduce me to this woman. Her name was Carrie. And all I remember is that she was really scoping me out. She had huge boobs because she had breast implants. And he knew her, and I just kind of wondered how they were connected to each other because she was then saying that she was married to a younger man and she didn't know how to keep him.